All right, I'm coming on out here. Can see you all. Hello. Well, this is kind of fun once again. You know, we're trying different things. About a year ago, we couldn't have done this because we didn't have the FM transmitter. So we have really changed a lot in a year in what we're able to do and how we're able to be together. So on this Palm Sunday, one of the things I was thinking about is how many conversations I've had with you all. Not just about, some of the many things that we've all experienced this year, of frustrations of being alone, of not being able to be with family and friends, of missed moments, missed birthdays, muted holidays that are just not as exciting as they have been in the past because of the pandemic. But I've also talked with some of you. Quite a few of you have really difficult things you're struggling with. Family members maybe who have big health problems, sometimes mental issues they're struggling with, and you're being a huge support. Maybe that is you yourself that is struggling, and I may not know about it, about a health or an emotional or mental issue that is really, really difficult and taking a lot of your will and a lot of your energy. And some of you have also said that it can be frustrating because doctors don't always listen deeply. There are times where you've reached out to maybe friends or family or doctors or psychiatrists, and some of them listen well, and some of them stop and focus and try to help, and some don't. And it can be so frustrating to feel not heard, right? Especially when you're struggling, when you are going through something and you need help and you're asking for help. And there's people who can't hear it. They don't have time, or they don't have within them the emotional capacity to be with you in your struggle. Earlier this week, I was in yet another Zoom meeting with a bunch of pastors, and one of them was Pastor Melissa from Tapestry, whom we gave a $5,000 gift to from our insurance money. Tapestry is that bilingual Spanish ministry in Richfield. And a lot of the people that Tapestry ministers to are Hispanic immigrants, who, as you may realize, a lot of them are working really hard, and some of them have been laid off in the pandemic. It's a big struggle. And Pastor Melissa said, the laws that are made in Minnesota and at the federal level, every law that passes, my people are the most affected, and they're the least listened to. Imam Mohammed Omar from Dar al-Farouk was also on the call, and most of the members of his mosque here in Bloomington are also recent immigrants from East Africa and so forth. And he said the same thing. He said, it is so frustrating because politicians will come to our mosque, because it's a big mosque, and they'll do a meet and greet. They'll come and get their picture taken with us. They'll shake our hands. They'll put it on their, Facebook or whatever, but they never listen to our struggles. And I thought that was so fascinating, that here is a group of people that are the least heard, the least listened to, and are most affected by the decisions that politicians make. I learned something recently about Palm Sunday biblically that I'd never heard before. I knew that Jesus came into Jerusalem and that the donkey he was on represented humility. And I knew that the palm branches that people waved were a symbol of the messiahship and victory, that the people were really hoping that Jesus was going to be that new King David to overthrow the government and take his place as king. But what I did not know was that there was actually another procession happening on that day in another part of the city. Pontius Pilate, who normally lived on the seaside in a palace, would come to Jerusalem during festival times to make sure that insurrections did not happen. I did not know that he would come with a parade and he'd be on horses with all his military people, and there would be a huge show of force to intimidate and scare people, and that all of the people lined up along the streets were silent. Can you picture that for a moment? Pontius Pilate dressed to the nines on a huge military steed, and all his generals and so behind him, trumpets, swords, spears. And as they're making this huge procession, they're intending to give the message that if you try to come against us, you will be squashed like a bug. And everybody is watching this silently, feeling fear maybe awe. Maybe some have that thrill of the excitement that sometimes power, when you watch Power, it's just kind of cool. Like that feeling we get when we watch a superhero movie sometimes. We're just like, oh man, that power, that's so cool. Maybe people were even standing there in the crowds wondering what it'd be like to be one of his generals, dressed in wonderful clothing, having all that power, that position. Maybe even as they looked at the very person that was oppressing them, they still thought, oh, it'd be so great to be him. So when Jesus comes into Jerusalem, what he's doing is 100% intentional. He's doing a counter parade. My friends, it's a counter protest to the power of Rome. To me, this changes so much what Jesus did. That he's not just coming in a humble way. He's coming in the opposite way of Pontius Pilate to show people that he represents the exact opposite of Rome. He comes in humbly, whereas Pontius Pilate comes in on a steed. He comes in by himself with walking disciples, and people are shouting. They are talking, they are singing, they are shouting, they are active, they are participants in this dream. They are not afraid. They are empowered because they know that here is a man who hears them. Here is a man who knows exactly what they're going through mentally, physically, economically, socially, and he has, in his ministry, proved to be deeply loving and compassionate and caring about the least of the least. And the people for whom that affected were drawn to him, excited. And so, if you think about these two very, very different parades happening in different parts of Jerusalem, and then think about who was drawn to them. Because maybe people had a choice. Maybe some people heard about Jesus and were like, you know what? That guy represents something else. And it hits me deep. I'm going to go and see him come. I want to hear what he does, what he has to say. And even if they got it wrong, even if they didn't quite understand who Jesus was, they at least knew that Jesus understood him, right? But some people said, no, I want to see the big shot. I want to see Pontius Pilate. The irony is they go and they look up at Pontius Pilate walking in, and they know who he is and what he stands for, but he doesn't care one bit about them. Not one bit. So when I think of it in this way, I think about how many times in church we actually want to go see Pontius Pilate. How many times we have tried to make Jesus into Pontius Pilate. I mean, think about our history. When the church came into power with privilege, think about all of the processions that church has done at times where maybe there was a little bit of that awe and that fear and power and privilege. And we know that we did some really awful things, whether it was the Inquisition or the Crusades or even colonialism, how we enforced and manipulated and used fear and guilt and shame to try to control other people. In America, we do not have a good history of how Christianity laid root in America. We have some very disturbing things in our past that we are uncovering and repenting of now that indicate we kind of wanted Jesus to be Pontius Pilate. We wanted him to be on our side, the powerful, and we wanted him to squish anyone that we didn't like, that we wanted under our control, under our foot. And so to me, as I learned about this, I began to think, which parade would I have shown up for? We know the good news is that Jesus is active and alive. He is listening to us. He knows our struggles. He hears the voice of the people who are most affected by the whims of this world and the least heard. And I think that Jesus calls us anew as the church to be in his parade. And we're going to get it wrong. I mean, the people waving palm branches didn't fully understand what he stood for, right? We're going to get it wrong. But if we're there, we have the chance to listen to Jesus anew, to be a part of things. Jesus himself went into Jerusalem, and the Pharisees were nervous. In many ways, you know, the Pharisees, the elders of the church, we can relate to them, and they were like, Jesus, you know that how Pontius Pilate's going to see your little parade, right? This was not a benign processional. You need to stop, and you need to tell everybody to be quiet. We do not want trouble here. And Jesus was like, man, if they were quiet, the stones would cry out, because people are hurting so badly, and they need to be heard. They need to express themselves. They need to stand for something that is not this violent, oppressive, manipulative power. And then he weeps and says, gosh, people. He says Jerusalem, but what if he said today to all of us, to all of America, to all of the world, and said, gosh, if only you knew the things that made for peace, there wouldn't be so much pain and suffering in this world. If only you knew the things that made for peace, everybody would get the mental and physical help they needed. If only you knew the things that made for peace, there wouldn't be homeless people or people having to choose between food and rent or getting their diagnosis and their health care. If only you knew the things that made for peace. But you don't. And so trouble comes up ahead. Trouble comes up ahead. We're walking into the holiest week of the year. This is what makes us Christians, my friends, this week. This is it. On Maundy, Thursday, we gather for the Last Supper or the First Supper. On Good Friday, we follow Jesus to the cross. And in light of all of that, we understand anew. Once again, we try to remember what happens next Sunday. But for today, I want you to just ponder and think, which parade are you drawn to? And then listen to the voices of politicians and media and activists and preachers. Which parade are they in? Are they celebrating power and crushing the voices of those who do not have power? Are they belittling and trying to keep the peace, in quotes, at the cost of the little ones? Or are they marching to a different drum? Are they empowering and lifting up the voices of the voiceless? Are they ready to let peace rule their hearts and the world in the best way possible? It'd be interesting just to notice. I invite you to notice that this week. We journey now as Jesus' ministry gets very intense and powers collide in a violent ending. But we know that's just the beginning. Amen.